Now, I want to talk about the second thing in this quote as it pertains to portrait painting. Now, I paint a lot of subjects. I'll paint landscapes, I'll paint still lifes, but I feel like portraits are the subject that has gotten me the most attention. It's opened a lot of doors for me and has paid the bills in the past. Back when I used to do commissions, the most common requested thing I'd get were portraits. And it's really cool. Like, being able to paint portraits is a really good, cool skill to have. It's like, no matter how digitized our world gets, or how easy it is to take photos or have AI paint something for you, everybody still responds way better to a painting. I remember when I first started oil painting, my first teacher told me, he said, "Chris, when you paint somebody, in a way you're immortalizing them forever." And I think that's true. For example, when my grandmother passed away, I decided to do a portrait to have at her funeral service. And once it was over, I gave that portrait to my mom. Now, my mom is one of 4 sisters, so of course what ended up happening was I ended up painting that same portrait of my grandma 3 more times for my aunts. And they all have tons of pictures of my grandma, but that painting is the thing that I feel like they cherish the most. There's just something about a painted portrait that a photo can't touch. Now, the thing is that I feel like a lot of people are too scared to even try and learn portraits. And they shouldn't be. It's really not as difficult as you would think it is, especially if you have the right instruction. And if there was one thing I wish somebody would have told me or kind of gotten into my head early on about portrait painting, is that you have to bring to the painting a certain level of knowledge about the face. Or as Richard Smith puts it, having an analytical grasp of what you are seeing. One of the very first things you're taught when you first start drawing or painting is, paint what you see, draw what you see. And there's certain things that you can do, like putting your painting upside down or looking at it in a mirror to make you really see what's going on and not let your mind play tricks on you and make you think you know what you're seeing. Now, that stuff is very important, but you also have to bring knowledge to what you're painting to fill gaps that the subject or the photo isn't giving you. I know this was very hard for me to get my mind around because I was drilled for so hard, paint what you see, draw what you see. The thought of having like preconceived ideas about what something should be was hard for me to understand. But once I did get it, it made all the difference with my portraits. So let's dive into this further. What are some of the biggest problems that people have or are fearful of when painting portraits? As someone who teaches painting portraits, I know skin tones is a big one. I'm always getting people asking me what colors you use in your palette? How do you get those skin tones? Now, something I think is very important to know before you go into mixing skin tones is that skin tones tend to be a lot more desaturated than a lot of colors you might see like in a landscape or a still life. This is why I think it's really helpful for beginners to use the Zorn palette or some modification of it. And the Zorn palette's ivory black, yellow ochre, cadmium red, and titanium white. Now, if you've seen any of my videos, I highly recommend keeping your palette as simple as possible. And I feel like this is the portrait version of keeping your palette simple because you're technically still just using the primaries. Just think of the black as a blue, and you got, your blue, red, and yellow. And the thing is that since the black and the yellow are already very desaturated colors, it's gonna be a lot easier to mix colors and kind of have them already be desaturated and looking like good flesh tones. Now, yes, a lot of color mixing is going to be isolating a color and then matching it. But with portraits, it's really helpful to understand and know the color zones of the face. Understanding that the nose and the cheeks are going to be redder than, say, probably the forehead, that the skin can get kind of grayer or cooler in areas around the mouth, or a little grayer or bluer in areas around the eyelids. This is helpful to know because a lot of times you can't really see it in a photo or even the subject in front of you, and you have to kind of play that up. So many times I see beginner portraits and it looks like they just mixed up one color and then just found different values of that same color for the entire portrait. Now, I actually created an exercise to kind of help demonstrate this and a whole bunch of other things. I took a portrait done by John Singer Sargent and I put it in Photoshop and I just blocked it out in just a bunch of shapes of flat color to really show my students like all the different colors that can be in a portrait. It's just a lot easier to see it when it's in this form than, a final painted form. I'll get more into this exercise later in the video and tell you where you can get access to the tutorial of it. But let's move on to the next thing that people struggle a lot with when it comes to portraits, and that is getting a likeness. Man, oh man, have I gotten this question a whole bunch. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Like you want to paint a portrait because you want to make it look like the person that you're painting. So how do we do that? And I always felt that getting a likeness was all about having things the right size on the portrait and in the right place. Now you can chalk this up to drawing, which it is, and yes, there are ways to get an accurate initial drawing, whether you're using a grid or measurements. You can break the face down into simple shapes, which is a lot easier to get drawn in. But it's not just about getting accurate measurements. Now I know there's been times with me where I felt like I measured everything out, everything looked great in the right place, but by the end of the painting, it just didn't look like the person. And I feel like a lot of that comes down to understanding form. Again, this is having a good analytical understanding of what you are seeing. You need to understand things like the planes of the face, that everybody's face to some degree has these planes in it. And if you understand that, you're gonna have a better image in your head three-dimensionally of what the face and the head should look like, which is gonna help you see more and help you indicate even more than what is in your reference. I always used to dismiss stuff like this because I always thought, oh, well, I can just paint what I see and draw what I see, and as long as I just paint what I see, I'll be fine. Little did I know that having an understanding of form helped me see a lot more. I would go as far as to say it helped me see twice as more. You really have to understand that your photo reference is not going to give you all the information you need to make a good painting. You need to be able to fill in those gaps, just like the scientists at Jurassic Park filled in the DNA gaps with DNA of a frog. For example, with this painting I did of Harrison Ford from Blade Runner, it'd be very easy to dismiss and not paint much form in the shadowed side of his face because it kind of just looks like it's all one color and one value. But I knew it wasn't. I actually looked at a plain model with the same lighting to understand where there would be value changes to create certain form in the face, to make sure that even if it was a little bit, I still indicated the cheekbone, the jaw, the little indications of form that didn't leave that shadowed side of the face looking flat. Another little thing to help you understand what I'm talking about is if you're somebody who's ever painted in the eyes on a portrait and you step back and you go, like I put the eyes in the wrong spot, or they need to be higher, they need to be lower, they're not right. If you paint around the eye, if you paint the form of the eye, you paint the form of the eye socket, the form of the cheekbone, the brow bone, paint everything around it, it's gonna be obvious where to place those eyes. All right, and let's move on to the third and last thing that I feel like people struggle with the most when it comes to portraits, and that is painting the features. A lot of people saying like, oh, like I can't paint the nose right, I can't get the eyes right, like how do you paint this, how do you paint that? And the reason you struggle painting the features is that you don't have a full grasp on the form and what is happening with those features. For example, with the eyes, a lot of times they can be hard to know how to paint because they're pretty small. A lot of times they're in shadow because they're in the eye sockets. But understanding simple things like just is that the eyelids have 3 planes, and having different values of those planes is going to help create form of that eye. There's just a lot to know, but once you know it, again, it's just gonna like open your eyes up and it's like, oh wow, it's a lot more easier now for me to, paint this and actually communicate it the way I want. All right, so back to this cool, fun shapes exercise. This is actually an exercise that I just put into my Portrait Painting 101 course, which has been out for a year now, and hundreds of students have gone through it and seen great results. And for this week, I am actually running a sale on this course. If you look in the description of this video, there's a coupon code that you can use at checkout to get a very big discount. Now, if you know anything about this course, it's actually my favorite of the courses that I have. I think some people are a little intimidated to get into it because they're intimidated of portraits, but you really shouldn't be intimidated because I took the complex skill of portrait painting and purposely broke it down into sub-skills. And each lesson you just focus on one sub-skill at a time. And then you put all of them together at the final portrait. And coming back to that Richard Smith quote is that this course is going to help give you a good analytical understanding of what you're seeing when you sit down to paint a portrait. You're not just going to be winging it, hoping it comes out good. In this course, I talk about everything from skin tones, breaking the face down into big shapes, the planes of the head. I have full lessons and demonstrations on each one of the features. And there's 3 different models that you can go through the course with. So technically you could go through the course 3 times. Also in there are recorded critiques where I've critiqued students' paintings. You know, we all struggle from the same mistakes, so you can learn from other students. And no aspect of the course is live. So once you have it, you have it. You can go through it whenever you want, as much as you want. There's no expiration date. Now, this discount code ends this Sunday, the 18th, so make sure you enroll soon. Hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out when I release new videos. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.